The first bullet snapped past her head so close it sheared a strand of her hair and buried itself in the mud wall behind her. Private First Class Riley Hayes didn't even flinch. She couldn't afford to. The Afghan village had gone silent except for the thunder of automatic gunfire and the frantic voices on the platoon net. She was crouched low behind a crumbling wall, AM4 pressed tight into her shoulder, sweat streaming down under her helmet, and she couldn't shake the knowledge that the enemy had drawn them right where they wanted them. Hayes, get eyes on that rooftop, 2 o'clock. Sergeant Dalton's voice barked through her headset. She leaned out, quick and sharp, just enough to see the shadow of a muzzle flash flicker on the rooftop across the alley. Her reticle found it before she thought about it. 2 controlled squeezes and the shadow jerked back. She didn't know if she hit him or scared him, but it bought a breath. Clear? Dalton shouted. Not sure, she answered, breath ragged. It had started as a routine patrol, if patrols in Kandahar could ever be called routine. But the village had felt wrong the moment they stepped in. Doors closed too quickly, children vanished behind walls, women who usually watched from rooftops were nowhere. Riley had felt it in her stomach first, a quiet tightening. Something was off. She should have spoken up, but she was just a private, barely 6 months in country. Dalton was a veteran of 3 tours, and Lieutenant Harper was fresh out of West Point with all the confidence in the world. What was she supposed to say? That her gut told her something was wrong? Now 3 men were down, one still bleeding out in the street where no one could reach him. And Riley couldn't shake the thought that maybe if she'd spoken up, they wouldn't be here. Movement left, someone shouted. A rocket-propelled grenade whined across the alley and slammed into a truck, flipping it in a fireball. The blast punched the air from Riley's lungs and she dropped flat, ears ringing. Dirt rained over her. Hayes, up. We need covering fire now. Dalton's hand was on her shoulder, dragging her half upright. She forced herself up, planted her rifle on the wall, and laid down bursts to pin the shooters. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. That was the one thing she had, steady hands when everything went to hell. Where the hell's Harper? Someone yelled. The lieutenant was somewhere down the line, screaming into his radio trying to get air support. Riley doubted it would come. They were too deep, too fast. The squad pulled back toward the center of the village, dragging their wounded with them. Riley covered the rear, firing in short, sharp bursts. Her world narrowed to the sight picture and the pounding in her ears. At one point she caught a glimpse of a boy, maybe 12, peering from behind a doorway wide-eyed. He wasn't holding a weapon, but his eyes said he knew exactly what was happening. Riley hesitated half a heartbeat, then forced herself forward. By the time they reached the square, the sun was dipping, shadows stretching long, and they were low on ammo. Harper was pale, radio still clutched in his fist, shaking his head. No CAS, no QRF. Nearest element is 30 minutes out. Dalton swore viciously. We don't have 30 minutes. Riley crouched against a broken fountain, chest heaving. Every decision felt like it teetered on a knife's edge. She thought of the bleeding man they'd had to leave behind. She thought of the families watching from behind shuttered windows. She thought of how the enemy seemed to know every alley, every rooftop. Sergeant, she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice was, they're hurting us. Dalton turned on her, eyes sharp. What? They're not pressing. They're moving us into the square. If they hit us from 3 sides, we're boxed in. He stared at her for half a beat, then cursed again. Lieutenant, we can't stay here. We move west toward the fields. Now. Harper looked torn, caught between the textbook and the reality bleeding out in front of him. We don't have confirmation. We don't need confirmation, Dalton snapped. We need to live. Riley didn't wait for orders. She was already moving, eyes scanning the rooftops, body low. The others followed because in the end, survival wasn't about rank, it was about instinct. The western alleys were tighter, easier to defend, but it also meant every shadow could hide a trigger. Twice, Riley spotted movement before the enemy could fire. Twice, she dropped them with clean shots. Each time she felt the cold knot in her stomach twist tighter. These weren't distant targets. These were faces, close enough to see the whites of their eyes before they went slack. Halfway through the maze of mud walls, they stumbled into a courtyard where an old man stood, hands raised, shouting in Pashto. Riley caught only fragments, warning, danger, not safe, but the urgency was clear. Dalton shoved him aside, eyes scanning. Keep moving. But Riley hesitated. Something about the old man's tone cut through the chaos. He wasn't begging for his life. He was trying to tell them something. Wait, she said. He knows. The ground shook as another explosion ripped through the wall ahead, showering them with brick and dust. Ambush. Again. The old man was gone when the dust cleared. They fought through it, bullet by bullet, step by step, until at last the alleys broke into the open fields. The horizon burned red with the setting sun, and for the first time in hours, Riley felt air that wasn't filled with dust and smoke. But the relief was short-lived. They were exposed here, nothing but waist-high crops for cover, and the gunfire chased them even as they ran. They were down to half their ammo, one more wounded being dragged, and the radio still spitting static. God damn it. Harper threw the handset down, face twisted. They're not coming. They'll come, Riley said, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. And then it happened, the thing that would burn in her memory forever. As they reached the far edge of the field, shadows moved ahead. Not insurgents this time. Americans. Figures in night gray kit, moving like predators through the grass. SEALs. They emerged like ghosts, weapons raised, scanning past Riley and her squad to the treeline beyond. Their leader, a tall man with salt in his beard, made a sharp signal. Within seconds, the SEALs had flanked the village, gunfire hammering from suppressed rifles, explosions ripping from charges placed with eerie precision. Riley dropped to her knees, exhausted, heart pounding. She had never seen combat move with such ruthless efficiency. It was like watching a storm peel the skin off the earth. When it was over, silence fell. Smoke drifted from the village, punctuated by the occasional distant crack of a rifle. The SEAL commander strode through the haze, eyes scanning until they found Riley. She was just a private, covered in grime, helmet tilted, rifle empty. But when he reached her, he stopped. For a long moment, he studied her face, the steadiness in her eyes despite the chaos. Then, without a word, he raised his hand and gave her a sharp, formal salute. Riley froze. She wasn't even supposed to be saluted, she didn't have the rank. She didn't even know if her hands worked anymore. But she raised one anyway, trembling, and returned it. Dalton and Harper stared in silence. The commander didn't explain. He just nodded once and moved on, his team melting back into the dark. Riley sat in the field, the salute burning in her chest, unsure if it was a blessing or a burden. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew this. Nothing about this war or her place in it would ever be the same again the night after the ambush stretched on forever. Riley sat with her back against the shattered remains of a mud wall, helmet off, fingers trembling as she reloaded magazines with whatever rounds she could scavenge. Around her, the squad moved in silence, tending wounds, whispering into radios that answered only with static, and watching the darkness for shapes that might not be there. The village smoldered in the distance. Sometimes a scream carried on the wind, sometimes a gunshot. Riley didn't let herself wonder who fired or who fell. She focused on the brass in her hands, the click of each round sliding into the magazine. It gave her something solid, something she could control. Dalton crouched beside her, one eye on the perimeter. His voice was low. "You did good back there." Riley looked up, startled. Praise was rare from him. "Sir," she started. "We lost. We lost people because that's what happens here," Dalton cut her off. "But we didn't lose all of us. And we didn't because you saw it before Harper did." She didn't answer. Her throat was tight. The faces of the dead weighed heavy in her mind, especially the one they'd had to leave in the street. Dalton must have read it in her eyes. He gave her shoulder a squeeze. "Carry it. Don't let it bury you." Across the camp, Lieutenant Harper paced like a caged animal, muttering into his dead radio, replaying the battle in fits of frustration. His fresh-pressed confidence had cracked. Riley could see it. The war had a way of peeling people raw, stripping away everything they thought they knew about themselves. And then there was the SEAL commander. His salute haunted her. He hadn't said a word, but in that one gesture, he'd seen something in her. She didn't know if it was respect or pity, and the not knowing gnawed at her. By dawn, reinforcements finally rolled in, armored vehicles growling through the dust, medics pouring out, officers demanding sit-reps. Harper rushed forward, desperate to assert command again, but Dalton just nodded toward Riley. "She'll give you the best read." She saw it all. It was the first time anyone had openly deferred to her. She wasn't sure whether to feel pride or dread. Hours later, after the wounded were lifted out and the village swept again, Riley found herself standing before the SEAL commander in the back of a battered Humvee. His gear was still dusted with soot, his eyes sharp but tired. "You kept your people alive," he said flatly, no preamble. Riley stiffened. "I just did what I had to." He studied her for a long moment as if weighing whether to say more. Finally he leaned closer. "Instinct's what keeps you breathing out here. Don't let anyone beat it out of you. Not officers. Not doubt. Not fear. She nodded, but words caught in her throat. Before she could answer, he was gone again, swallowed by his team and the noise of engines starting up. That was the last she saw of him that day. The next weeks blurred into patrols, checkpoints, and tense village meetings. Riley found herself sharper, quicker to notice details others missed. The kid with eyes too old for his face, the too quiet alley, the woman tugging her child away just before gunfire erupted. Each time she spoke up. Each time Dalton listened. Harper, not so much. The lieutenant's pride had curdled into resentment. He tolerated her input when it saved lives, but afterward, his jaw tightened, his orders came harsher, his tone clipped. She could feel the distance widening, and so could the squad. One evening, while cleaning her rifle under the thin light of a lantern, Specialist Ortiz dropped down beside her. He was always the joker, always with some smart-ass line ready, but tonight his grin was softer. "You realize you've become our unofficial radar, right?" he said. Riley frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You feel the bad stuff coming before it hits. Spooky haze. But we'll take spooky over dead." She laughed, a dry, surprised sound. It felt foreign in her chest after weeks of grit and tension. "Guess I just pay attention." "Yeah, well, don't stop. Harper might not like it, but the rest of us sure as hell do." He clapped her shoulder and wandered off, whistling. Riley stared after him, conflicted. She hadn't asked for this, didn't want to be the one people looked at when things got bad. But the war didn't care what she wanted. The breaking point came during a night patrol in the Arghandab Valley. The moon was low, casting everything in silver shadow. The squad moved quietly, weapons up, eyes sharp. The mission was to secure a compound suspected of harboring insurgents. Halfway there, Riley froze. A smell drifted on the air, burnt cordite, faint but fresh. Her gut twisted. "Stop," she whispered. Dalton signaled a halt. "What do you see?" "Not see. Smell. Someone fired recently." "Close." Harper hissed in annoyance. "We keep moving. That compound won't clear itself." Dalton hesitated, eyes flicking between them. Then he trusted Riley. "We sweep wide. Avoid the main trail." Minutes later they spotted it. A tripwire stretched across the path, barely visible in the moonlight. An IED buried beneath it. If they'd kept moving, half the squad would have been shredded. The discovery rattled Harper more than he admitted. He covered it with anger, chewing Riley out for hesitating in the field, even as the others exchanged looks that said they knew who'd saved them. Riley took it silently, jaw tight, because she understood the truth. Harper wasn't just angry at her. He was angry at himself, at the war, at the weight he couldn't carry. That night, as they settled into defensive positions around the compound, Ortiz whispered, "You know he's gonna make your life hell for this, right?" "I know," Riley said quietly. "Still worth it?" She thought about the tripwire, about the bodies that would have littered the trail. "Yeah. Still worth it." 2 days later, word came down. The platoon was being tasked with supporting a joint raid, Army and SEALs, on a weapons cache deep in contested territory. It was dangerous, high stakes, the kind of mission whispered about over campfires. When Riley heard the name of the SEAL commander leading it, her stomach flipped. The night of the raid, the air was heavy with anticipation. Helicopters thumped overhead, their rotors churning dust into clouds. Riley double-checked her gear, her rifle, the extra mag strapped across her vest. Around her, the squad moved with practiced efficiency, but the tension was palpable. Dalton caught her eye as they loaded into the bird. "Stay sharp, Hayes. This one's gonna test us." She nodded, heart pounding. The flight in was a blur of noise and vibration, the red glow of the cabin lights painting everyone's faces in blood. Riley closed her eyes, forced her breathing steady, tried not to think about the fact that they were flying straight into the teeth of the enemy. When the helicopter dropped them into the dark, the world exploded. Tracers lit the night, the rattle of machine guns echoing off the hills. The ground shook with the concussions of mortars. Riley hit the dirt running, weapon up, ears ringing, mind sharp. The SEALs moved like shadows again, cutting through defenses with ruthless precision. But this time the Army squad wasn't just along for the ride. They were holding flanks, breaching buildings, dragging out crates of weapons under fire. At one point, Riley found herself pinned behind a wall with Dalton, bullets chewing the stone to dust inches above their heads. "Options." Dalton barked. She scanned fast. A narrow alley, unguarded. A fuel barrel at the corner. An idea formed, reckless and desperate. "Grenade in the barrel." "Fireball cover us," she said. Dalton didn't hesitate. He yanked a frag, pulled the pin and tossed it. The explosion turned the night into fire, screams echoing. In the chaos they sprinted, weaving through the smoke, hearts hammering. By the time they regrouped at the extraction point, sweat soaked Riley's uniform, soot streaked her face, and her hands were raw from gripping her rifle so hard. But the weapons cache was destroyed and their squad was intact. As the helicopters lifted them out, Riley caught sight of the SEAL commander across the cabin. Their eyes met for a moment in the roar of the engines. He gave her the smallest of nods, approval, recognition. She didn't need a salute this time. The nod was enough. Back at base, the debrief was chaos. Harper tried to spin the mission as his leadership triumph, but the reports told a different story. Dalton's decisions, Riley's instincts, the squad's grit. Rumors spread quickly about the private who'd smelled an ambush, who'd spotted traps, who'd saved lives more than once. Some called it luck, others instinct, but whispers carried weight in war. For Riley it was overwhelming. She hadn't come here to stand out. She'd come to serve, to do her job, to get home in one piece. Now eyes followed her in the chow hall, questions lingered when she walked by, and even seasoned NCOs gave her space. That night, lying awake in her bunk, Riley stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above. She thought about the salute, the nod, the whispers. She thought about the faces of the men she couldn't save, the weight of decisions she hadn't been trained to make. She didn't know if she was becoming something more, or if the war was just carving her into someone she wouldn't recognize when it was over. Either way, the mystery of what the SEAL commander had seen in her remained, gnawing at the edges of her thoughts. And deep down, beneath the exhaustion and fear, a new question grew louder with every passing day. What if instinct wasn't just about survival? What if it was leading her toward something bigger? The sun bled over the horizon in shades of red and orange, and Riley was already awake. She hadn't really slept. She sat on the edge of her bunk, boots laced, rifle cleaned, uniform stiff with the smell of sweat and dust. Around her, the barracks stirred, men coughing, joking, swearing softly as they pulled gear together for another day in Afghanistan. But Riley's mind wasn't on the routine. It was on the SEAL commander's nod, on Dalton's words, on Harper's resentment, and on the gnawing question she couldn't shake. Why her? Why did everyone else seem to think she had some kind of instinct for survival, when all she felt was fear? She strapped on her vest, cinched it tight, and forced the thought down. Survival wasn't about asking why. It was about being ready. The morning briefing came fast. Intelligence had flagged another hot zone, a suspected meeting between Taliban cell leaders in a village north of Kandahar. The mission was to intercept, disrupt, and capture if possible. The kind of mission that could swing momentum, if it didn't chew them up first. Harper laid it out in his clipped officer voice, trying to sound confident. Riley watched his hands shake just slightly as he pointed at the map. Dalton leaned against the wall, arms crossed, saying nothing, eyes on Riley now and then like he was gauging her reaction. When the briefing ended, Ortiz muttered as they filed out, "Guess we're the bait again." "Better than being the hook," Riley answered before she could stop herself. Ortiz grinned. "You're starting to sound like Dalton." She shook her head, but the truth was Dalton's influence was settling into her bones. She trusted his instincts, and more dangerously he trusted hers. The convoy rolled out under the merciless Afghan sun. Dust kicked up in choking clouds as the Humvees growled over uneven roads. Riley sat in the back, helmet low, eyes scanning the terrain. Every dip in the ground, every cluster of rocks, every abandoned structure made her pulse quicken. She had learned not to ignore that edge of fear. It sharpened her. As they neared the village, the radio crackled with chatter from the forward scouts. Nothing obvious. No contact. Too quiet. Riley's stomach knotted. She tapped Dalton's shoulder. "Feels wrong." He didn't ask why. He just gave a small nod. "Eyes up, people. Hayes says something's off." Harper's voice cut in from the lead vehicle. "We stick to the plan. No detours." Dalton's reply was flat. "We'll see about that." The village was small, a cluster of mud brick houses and narrow alleys. The convoy slowed to a crawl. Villagers peeked from doorways, wary, silent. Riley scanned their faces. No kids playing. No chatter. That was wrong. Children were always the last to hide. She gripped her rifle tighter. Then it came, the first crack of gunfire echoing off the walls. A burst of automatic fire followed, then another. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the convoy, punching holes in metal, shattering glass. Contact left. Contact right. Voices screamed over the net. Riley dove from the Humvee, rolling behind a wall as rounds stitched the dirt where she'd been. She came up firing, Controlled bursts into the muzzle flashes sparking from rooftops. Dalton's voice thundered. Move. Get off the street. The squad scattered into cover, dragging the wounded, firing back in short, brutal bursts. Riley felt the heat of a bullet graze her arm, but adrenaline smothered the pain. She spotted movement on a rooftop, a man with an RPG shouldering it, aiming for the convoy. No time to think. She snapped her rifle up, squeezed, and the man crumpled before he could fire. Nice shot, Hayes. Ortiz yelled from across the street. But there was no time to celebrate. More insurgents poured from the alleys, firing wildly, shouting in Pashto. The squad was outnumbered, pinned down, boxed in. Harper's voice came frantic over the net. We need air support. Now. Static answered. Riley's pulse hammered. They'd been cut off again just like before. She swallowed hard, forcing her mind clear. Dalton, she shouted, pointing down a side alley. There's a way through, if we move now. He looked, waited, and nodded. Squat, follow Hayes. Move. They broke from cover, sprinting down the alley as bullets chewed the walls around them. Ortiz went down hard, clutching his leg, screaming. Riley skidded to a stop, grabbed him under the arm, and dragged him forward as Dalton and two others laid down covering fire. Go. Go. Dalton roared. They burst into another courtyard, breath ragged, Ortiz groaning as blood soaked his pant leg. Riley dropped with him behind cover, ripping open a field dressing, hands steady despite the chaos. She wrapped the wound tight, ignoring his swearing. Still with me? She asked. Yeah, Ortiz hissed. Don't let me slow you down. You're not getting out of this that easy. Dalton crouched beside them, face grim. We're boxed again. Only way out's through the mosque at the center. They'll be waiting. Riley swallowed. The mosque meant a kill zone. But staying meant dying slow. Then we go, she said. Harper's voice cut in sharp. That's suicide. We hold here until support arrives. There is no support. Dalton snapped. We move or we're dead. The squad looked between them waiting. Riley's eyes met Dalton's, steady. Through the mosque. And just like that, the decision was made. The run to the mosque was madness. Bullets whipped past, the air thick with dust and smoke. Riley fired until her rifle clicked empty, then slammed in another mag and kept going. They hit the courtyard hard, breaching the mosque doors with a thunderous crash. Inside, shadows moved, insurgents waiting. The fight turned close and brutal, rifles roaring in the echoing chamber, muzzle flashes lighting the carved walls. Riley's world narrowed to seconds. A man lunged at her with a knife. She blocked with her rifle, drove her boot into his chest, pulled the trigger point blank. Another came from the side, but Dalton cut him down. It felt like hours, but it was minutes. When the last insurgent fell, the mosque was filled with the ringing silence of smoke and death. The squad was bloodied, battered, but alive. They pushed through the back out into the open fields. For the first time, the sky stretched wide above them, free of the claustrophobic alleys. Riley sucked in air like she hadn't breathed in years. Behind them, the village burned. They staggered toward the rally point, dragging Ortiz, half carrying the wounded. And then, as if summoned by the fire itself, helicopters thundered overhead. Not too late this time. Extraction. The squad collapsed into the birds, exhausted, filthy, alive. Riley sat with her back against the vibrating wall, rifle across her knees, heart pounding in her ears. Dalton sat across from her, eyes locked on hers. You kept us moving, he said simply. She shook her head. You made the call. He leaned forward, voice low but fierce. Don't downplay it. You're the reason we're still breathing. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because for the first time she believed him. Back at base, Harper filed his report, glossing over his hesitation, framing his decisions as decisive. But the squad knew. The whispers grew louder. About Hayes. About the private who saw things before they happened, who kept people alive when officers froze. One night, Ortiz limped into the wrecked tent on crutches, grinning despite the bandages. To Hayes, he said loudly, raising a plastic cup of stale soda. The luckiest damn private in Afghanistan. The squad laughed, cheered, clinked cups. Riley forced a smile, but inside, the word luckiest twisted like a knife. Luck meant random chance. What she felt in the pit of her stomach didn't feel random. Later, as the others drifted out, Dalton sat beside her. You ever wonder why the SEAL commander saluted you? He asked quietly. She blinked at him. All the time. Dalton's eyes were sharp, thoughtful. Maybe he saw what I'm seeing now. You've got something. Call it instinct, call it fate, I don't care. But it's real. And it's rare. She looked away, throat tight. I didn't ask for it. Nobody does, he said. But it's yours anyway. His words sat heavy on her chest. She lay awake that night, staring at the dark ceiling, hearing the roar of gunfire in her memory, seeing the SEAL commanders nod, Dalton's fierce eyes. What if they were right? What if she did have something? And if she did, what would it cost her? Because in war, nothing came without a price. The wind howled across the desert plain, carrying dust that stung eyes and filled lungs. Riley pulled her chamois tighter over her face as the convoy rolled north, the growl of engines vibrating through the steel floor beneath her boots. Another mission. Another chance to live or die. This one felt different. The briefing had been clear. Insurgent leaders were gathering to plan a cross-border strike. If successful, it would cripple supply lines and kill countless Americans. The orders were blunt. Disrupt, destroy, capture if possible. No excuses. Harper had stood at the map board, pointer steady, voice confident as if the last ambush hadn't cracked him. He emphasized discipline, chain of command, no freelancing. But Riley noticed how he avoided her eyes, how his jaw clenched when Dalton nodded at her during the briefing. The squad loaded quietly, checking gear, locking magazines. Ortiz was back, limping but insistent on joining, his grin unshakable. Try not to let me get shot this time, Hayes. Do your part and duck when I say, she shot back, surprising herself with the humor. Laughter rippled through the squad, easing the edge of tension. But under it all, Riley's gut twisted. The air felt heavy, charged. She had learned to trust that weight. Hours later, they dismounted on the outskirts of a ruined village. The place was ancient, crumbling walls and narrow alleys winding like a labyrinth. Perfect for an ambush. Perfect for mistakes. Dalton spread them out, signals sharp and silent. Riley moved low, rifle up, every sense stretched taut. Her boots crunched softly on broken stone. Shadows shifted with the moonlight, each one threatening. They reached the central square, empty, too empty. A dead goat lay in the dust, throat cut, flies buzzing. Riley froze. Something's wrong, she whispered. Dalton gave her a quick glance. What do you see? She scanned, pulse hammering. It's staged. Too clean. They want us here. Before Dalton could answer, a flash erupted from the rooftops. Gunfire rained down, a storm of lead and flame. The squad dove for cover, shouting, returning fire blindly. Harper's voice tore through the comms. Hold your ground. Don't retreat. Dalton cursed, pulling Riley and Ortiz behind a half-collapsed wall. We're pinned. Options. Riley scanned fast. The square was death. Every angle covered. But she saw it. A gap between two buildings, a collapsed archway leading to the back alleys. There, she pointed. We cut through, flank them. Dalton didn't hesitate. Squad with Hayes. Move. Harper's voice barked, furious. That's insubordination. I said hold position. No one listened. Survival wasn't about orders. It was about instinct. They broke through the archway, sprinting down the alley as bullets sparked on stone around them. Riley led, heart hammering, every step a gamble. Behind them, Harper's voice crackled again, but it was drowned by the chaos. They burst into a courtyard behind the shooters. Dalton raised his fist. On my mark. Riley steadied her rifle, breath tight. Dalton dropped his hand. The squad opened fire, a storm of precision and fury. Insurgents fell, scattered, tried to flee. Grenades thundered, shaking the earth. In minutes, the rooftop fire died to silence. The squad regrouped, gasping, faces streaked with soot and sweat. Ortiz slapped Riley's back, grinning through the exhaustion. You've got a scary talent for not dying, you know that? Riley tried to smile, but her eyes kept drifting to Harper, storming toward them, face twisted with rage. You disobeyed a direct order, he roared, pointing at Dalton, then Riley. You put the entire mission at risk. Dalton stepped forward, jaw tight. We'd all be dead if we stayed in that square. That's not your call, Sergeant. And you? Harper jabbed a finger at Riley. You're a private. You don't make decisions. The squad tensed, silent, eyes darting between them. Riley met Harper's glare, her own voice calm but steady. I didn't make a decision. I saw a way out. Sergeant Dalton made the call. Harper's face flushed red, veins bulging. But before he could unleash more, the radio crackled. Command was demanding updates. Mission still ongoing. Dalton's voice cut like steel. We move. Debate later. The night dragged on, the mission grinding forward through alleys and ruined compounds. Each corner felt like a trap, each shadow alive. Riley's instincts pulled them left, then right, avoiding IEDs, spotting tripwires, sensing movement before it struck. The others noticed. They started glancing to her before Dalton, waiting for her read. Harper saw it too and it burned him. At last they reached the objective, a fortified compound on the village's edge. Heat signatures lit it up on drone feed. Dozens inside. Armed. Waiting. Dalton crouched with Riley, eyes scanning the walls. We can't hit this head-on. Thoughts. She studied the layout, the crumbled corner near a collapsed wall. A blind spot. Risky but possible. There, she whispered. We breach low, come in under their fire. Fast and quiet. Dalton nodded. You heard her. That's our entry. Harper snapped. Absolutely not. That's insane. We're waiting for reinforcements. There's no time, Dalton shot back. They'll scatter. Orders were to disrupt now. The squad waited, hearts pounding. Finally Dalton gave the signal. We go. They moved like shadows, crawling through the rubble, hearts thundering. Riley led, squeezing through the gap, rifle raised. The compound stank of sweat and gun oil. Voices muttered inside. Insurgents unaware. Dalton mouthed 3, 2, 1. They stormed in. Gunfire erupted, deafening. Muzzles flashed, shadows fell. Riley dropped 1, 2, 3, moving on instinct, her body flowing before her mind caught up. Grenades boomed, shattering walls, sending men flying. It was chaos, screams, blood, smoke. The squad cut through like lightning, every second life or death. Riley felt the burn of a round graze her side, but she didn't stop. Then silence. The last insurgent fell. The compound was theirs. Breathless, trembling, Riley leaned against a wall, heart slamming. Around her, the squad gathered, battered but alive. Dalton clapped her shoulder, eyes fierce. You just saved us again. Ortiz grinned, bloody but unbroken. If Hayes keeps this up, we'll all be saluting her soon. Laughter rippled, brief and raw, cutting through the smoke. But Harper didn't laugh. He stood rigid, eyes blazing, staring at Riley like she was the enemy. Back at base, the after-action report tore everything open. Harper filed it with venom, painting Riley as reckless, Dalton as insubordinate. He argued that they jeopardized the mission, disrespected the chain of command, endangered lives. But the squad's testimonies told a different story. Riley's instincts had saved them. Dalton's leadership had carried them. Harper's hesitation had nearly killed them. Command took notice. Whispers grew louder. The private with uncanny instincts. The sergeant who trusted her. The lieutenant losing control. Riley sat outside the barracks one night, staring at the desert stars, feeling the weight of it all. She hadn't asked for this. She just wanted to survive. But survival had made her something else. Dalton sat beside her, quiet. After a while he said, Harper's gunning for you. He'll push hard. You ready for that? Riley swallowed. Doesn't matter if I'm ready. It's coming anyway. Dalton nodded. Then you keep doing what you're doing. The squad knows the truth. That's what matters. She looked at him, at the trust in his eyes, and felt both pride and fear. Because the truth was clear now, every choice she made carried lives. And the more they looked to her, the heavier it became. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, the sound sharp against the silence. Riley's gut twisted again, that familiar pull. War wasn't done with her. Not yet. And deep inside, a darker thought whispered, a question she didn't dare say aloud. What if survival wasn't enough anymore? The base never truly slept, but tonight it was quieter than usual. The sky stretched black above the compound, pierced by scattered stars and the occasional distant rumble of artillery. Riley lay in her bunk, boots still on, staring at the corrugated ceiling. She hadn't closed her eyes in hours. Harper's voice still rang in her head, sharp and venomous. You're a private. You don't make decisions. But she had. And because of that, her squad was alive. The barracks door creaked and Dalton slipped in, helmet tucked under his arm. His face was drawn, exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. He dropped onto the bunk across from her. You're awake, he said quietly. Can't sleep, Riley admitted. He nodded like he understood. Command called me in. Harper's filing formal charges. Insubordination, dereliction of duty, undermining the chain of command. Her stomach clenched. Because of me. Because of both of us, Dalton corrected. His gaze held hers, steady. Don't carry this alone. I made the calls. You gave me the instincts. That's how it works. That's how we kept breathing. Riley bit back the words on her tongue, that maybe if she just stayed quiet, Harper wouldn't hate her, Dalton wouldn't be in the crosshairs. But she didn't say it because deep down she knew silence would have cost them all their lives. Dalton leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Listen, Hayes. Harper's not the kind of man who admits mistakes. He's going to push harder. And when he does, he'll try to break you. Don't let him. She nodded, throat tight. Dalton stood, clapped her shoulder, then slipped back out into the night. Riley sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She finally dozed just before dawn, restless dreams filled with gunfire and shadows. The next morning, orders came down for another mission. Recon and disruption along a suspected weapons smuggling route cutting through the desert hills. High risk. No guarantee of support. Harper addressed the squad with clipped authority, voice colder than usual. We'll follow the route as briefed. No deviations. No freelancing. You do exactly what I say when I say it. His eyes lingered on Riley, sharp as blades. The squad exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Dalton's jaw flexed, silent anger simmering beneath the surface. They rolled out in two Humvees, the desert stretching endless and harsh. Riley sat in the back, rifle across her lap, every muscle coiled. She couldn't shake the tension, the sense that this wasn't just another mission. It was a test. Hours passed. Heat shimmered off the ground, sweat-soaked uniforms. The convoy crawled through narrow passes where cliffs loomed on either side, perfect kill zones. Riley's stomach knotted tighter. At one choke point, she caught it, a glint high on the ridge, gone as fast as it came. Sniper scope. Contact, she shouted, diving down as the shot cracked. The round shattered against the Humvee's windshield, spider-webbing the glass. Gunfire erupted from the ridges. Insurgents poured lead down into the canyon. The squad bailed out, scrambling for cover, returning fire. Riley slid behind a boulder, firing up at the muzzle flashes. Dust and rock chips sprayed her face. She could hear Ortiz swearing, Dalton barking orders, Harper screaming into the radio. They've got the high ground. Dalton shouted. We're pinned? Riley's mind raced. The canyon funneled them into death. They couldn't win a stand-up fight here. Her eyes swept the ridge line, searching for anything, any weakness. There, a narrow gully cutting up the side, half hidden by rock. A flank. Risky as hell, but their only shot. She shouted over the gunfire. There's a path up the left. We can take the ridge. Dalton looked, saw it, nodded instantly. She's right. Ace Ortiz, you're with me. The rest lay suppressive fire. Harper's voice tore through the chaos. Negative. Hold your ground. That's an order. Dalton ignored him. Move. They sprinted for the gully, bullets snapping past, ricocheting off stone. Riley's lungs burned as they scrambled upward, hands clawing at rock, boots slipping. Ortiz grunted, dragging himself despite the limp. Halfway up, an insurgent appeared above them, rifle leveled. Riley fired first, dropping him before he could squeeze the trigger. Her hands didn't shake. They reached the top, breath ragged, and unleashed hell into the enemy flank. Insurgents panicked, their fire breaking. The squad below surged forward, seizing the advantage. Minutes later it was over. The canyon fell silent except for the ringing in their ears and the groans of the wounded. Smoke drifted, the stench of cordite heavy in the air. Dalton clapped Riley's shoulder, grinning through the exhaustion. Hell of a call. Ortiz wheezed a laugh. Remind me to never doubt your gut again. But Harper was already storming up the slope, face twisted with fury. You disobeyed a direct order, he shouted, voice raw. Do you understand what that means? You could face court-martial. Dalton stepped in, chest to chest with him. We followed instinct. We saved lives. That's what it means. Harper's eyes flicked to Riley, blazing. You think you're some kind of hero? You're a private. You don't get to gamble with my mission. Riley met his glare, steady despite the pounding in her chest. I didn't gamble. I saw the only way out. For a moment she thought he might hit her. His fists clenched, his face purple with rage. Then he turned sharply, storming off without another word. The squad exchanged looks, some uneasy, some defiant. Dalton's eyes met Riley's and she saw it there. This was only the beginning. Back at base, the fallout hit hard. Harper's report was scathing, demanding disciplinary action against Dalton and Riley. But the after-action results were undeniable. The squad had survived, the route was cleared, the insurgents crushed. Command hesitated. Rumors spread faster than orders. Soldiers from other units whispered about the private with uncanny instincts, the sergeant who trusted her, the lieutenant losing his grip. Some called Riley lucky. Others called her cursed. But everyone talked. Riley hated it. She hadn't asked for attention. She just wanted to keep her squad alive. But war didn't care what she wanted. One night, Ortiz cornered her outside the chow hall, crutches digging into the dirt. "You know Harper's going to make his move, right? He can't stand that you're the one saving us." Riley sighed. "I don't want to fight him." Ortiz's grin was sharp. "Doesn't matter what you want. Out here, fights find you." The fight came sooner than she expected. 2 weeks later, orders came for a joint mission, Army providing security for a SEAL-led strike on a high-value target. The SEAL commander was the same one who'd saluted Riley. The tension in the squad was palpable as they geared up. Dalton calm, focused. Ortiz grinning like always. Harper radiating barely contained fury. Riley tightened her straps, steadying her breath. The operation launched under cover of night. Helicopters roared low over the desert, dropping them near the target compound. SEALs moved like phantoms, their presence electric. Riley felt it again, that pull in her gut. A heaviness, a warning. "Something's off," she whispered to Dalton as they advanced. He didn't question. "What do you see?" She scanned the compound. Too quiet. No movement. No sentries. Her stomach twisted. "It's a trap." Dalton signaled the squad to slow. But before he could relay it, Harper snapped over the comms. "Advance." "That's an order." Dalton hesitated. Riley's pulse pounded. And then the night erupted. The compound exploded in fire, secondary blasts ripping the air. Insurgents poured from hidden tunnels, weapons blazing. The sky lit with tracers, the ground shook with detonations. Chaos swallowed them whole. Riley hit the dirt, firing blind, ears ringing. Dalton dragged Ortiz behind cover. SEALs counterattacked with ruthless precision, but the ambush was brutal. Through the smoke, Riley saw Harper, standing exposed, screaming orders that made no sense, panic in his eyes. An insurgent leveled his rifle at him. Without thinking, Riley sprinted forward, shoving Harper down just as the shot cracked past. She dropped the shooter with 2 rounds, then hauled Harper to cover by his vest. He stared at her, stunned, anger warring with disbelief. "Why?" "Because you're still one of us," she shouted, then spun back to fire. The fight raged, brutal and unrelenting. Minutes stretched like hours. At last, the SEALs broke the enemy line, explosives collapsing the tunnels. The survivors fled into the night. Silence fell, broken only by ragged breaths and the groans of the wounded. Riley sat slumped against a wall, chest heaving, hands trembling. Dalton dropped beside her, blood streaked across his face. "You were right again," he said, voice hoarse. "Trap." She shook her head, eyes on Harper, who sat a few feet away, staring at her with something unreadable. Anger, yes, but something else too. Respect? Fear? She didn't know. And that uncertainty gnawed at her worse than bullets ever could. Because if Harper couldn't control her, he might try to destroy her. And in war, destruction came easy. That night, as the helicopters carried them back, Riley stared out into the darkness. Her body ached, her ears rang, her chest was heavy with the weight of choices. The SEAL commander passed by, resting a hand briefly on her shoulder. A silent gesture, but it burned hotter than words. Dalton caught her eye across the cabin, his nod steady, unshakable. And Harper sat rigid, silent, eyes locked on her like a man staring at the storm he couldn't outrun. Riley closed her eyes, the thrum of rotors vibrating through her bones. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, praise, punishment, or death. But she knew one thing. Her war was only just beginning. The desert was cold at night, the kind of cold that crept into the bones despite body armor and sweat-soaked uniforms. Riley stood watch on the edge of the forward operating base, rifle slung across her chest, scanning the horizon. The stars burned sharp overhead, indifferent to the war below. She hadn't spoken to Harper since the ambush. He avoided her when he could, but when their paths crossed, his eyes held the same storm, anger, frustration, and something darker. Dalton tried to ease the tension, cracking jokes, keeping the squad steady. Ortiz hobbled along on his crutches, still determined to contribute, still grinning through pain. The others, Carter, Mills, Jennings, watched Riley differently now. They trusted her, maybe too much. That trust was dangerous. Harper wouldn't forgive it. The next mission came fast, too fast. Intelligence pointed to a convoy of insurgent trucks carrying explosives across the desert. The squad was tasked with interception. Simple in theory, suicidal in practice. Harper delivered the briefing with icy precision. "We hit them here," he said, stabbing the map. "Ambush clean, controlled. We follow the plan to the letter." His gaze cut to Riley. No deviations. Dalton's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Riley kept her expression neutral, though her gut twisted. They rolled out at dawn, sun bleeding red across the sand. The Humvees rattled over uneven ground, dust clouds trailing. Riley sat in the back, eyes on the horizon, waiting for that pull in her gut, the warning that never failed her. It came sooner than expected. They reached the ambush point, set positions, waited. Hours dragged. The sun climbed, brutal heat pressing down. Finally the convoy appeared, 4 trucks barreling down the dirt track, armored, gunners perched on the beds. But something felt wrong. Too orderly. Too obvious. Riley's pulse quickened. She scanned the ridges, the dunes, the empty sky. Where are they hiding? And then she saw it. A shimmer in the sand just off the track. Half-buried metal. IEDs. A kill zone. Her stomach dropped. She whispered urgently into her comms. It's a trap. They want us to fire first. Dalton turned, eyes sharp. You sure? Yes. Harper cut in, voice sharp. Ignore her. Stick to the plan. Dalton hesitated, torn. Seconds stretched, the convoy closing fast. Riley felt it in her bones. If they fired, the whole desert would erupt. She yanked her rifle down, signaling the others. Hold fire. Hold fire. But Harper was already shouting, engage. Gunfire ripped from the ridge. The convoy swerved, brakes squealing. The ground shook. Explosions tore through the sand, fireballs roaring sky-high. The IEDs cooked off, chain reactions ripping the desert apart. Riley hit the ground, ears ringing, sand and shrapnel raining down. Screams echoed through the chaos. When the smoke cleared, 2 Humvees were burning. Carter lay twisted, unmoving. Jennings staggered, bleeding from his face. Ortiz cursed, pinned under debris. Dalton dragged Riley to her feet, fury in his eyes. Damn it, Hayes, you were right again. Harper stumbled from cover, coughing, covered in soot. His face was a mask of rage and denial. We followed the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. Dalton rounded on him, voice like thunder. Your plan killed Carter. The squad stared, stunned. No one spoke. Harper's face twisted, but no words came. He turned and stormed off, leaving silence in his wake. Back at base, the squad was broken. Carter's bunk sat empty, his gear still neatly folded. No one touched it. Ortiz moved slower, injuries worse than he admitted. Jennings kept his face wrapped, avoiding mirrors. Dalton filed his report honestly, IEDs, ambush, Harper's call. Riley backed him. The others did too. But Harper filed his own version, shifting blame. He claimed Riley spread doubt, caused hesitation, cost them Carter. He framed Dalton as complicit. Command didn't know who to believe. Investigations dragged, interviews repeated. Meanwhile, missions didn't stop. The squad felt the fracture every day. Some soldiers from other units started whispering, siding with Harper. Better a flawed officer than a private who thought she knew better. Others quietly approached Riley, asking her to read maps to double-check routes. Riley hated it. The weight of it crushed her chest. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Carter's face. And she knew silence had a cost she couldn't pay again. The breaking point came on a night raid. Intel flagged a safe house on the edge of the mountains, said to house an insurgent leader. High priority. Harper was in command. From the moment they loaded up, Riley felt it, the heaviness, the dread. Her gut twisted so hard it made her nauseous. She tried to speak. Sir, something's wrong with this intel. We should recon first. Harper snapped. Shut your mouth, Hayes. You don't get to question orders. Dalton bristled, but Harper silenced him with a glare. They advanced under moonlight, shadows stretching long across the sand. The safe house loomed ahead, a squat building of stone and mud. Quiet. Too quiet. Riley's breath caught. Her hands shook on her rifle. Every fiber screamed, don't go in. Sir, please? That's enough, Harper snarled. Squad breach. Dalton froze, torn between duty and survival. Riley's voice broke through. It's a trap. Don't. But Harper shoved past, kicking the door. The world exploded. The house wasn't a safe house. It was rigged top to bottom. The blast ripped the night apart, fire and stone and steel shredding the air. The shockwave hurled Riley back, slammed her into the dirt. Her ears rang, vision blurred. She tasted blood. Screams cut through the haze. Dalton was dragging bodies clear. Ortiz shouted, half buried in rubble. Jennings lay still, unmoving. Riley crawled forward, choking on dust. Harper was pinned under a beam, legs crushed, face pale. Their eyes met. For the first time, there was no anger in his gaze. Only shock. Fear. Riley staggered toward him. Dalton yelled, leave him. The structure's coming down. But she couldn't. She grabbed the beam, straining, pain tearing through her muscles. Dalton appeared beside her, together heaving until Harper was dragged free. They stumbled clear just as the building collapsed in a roaring inferno. Silence followed, heavy and endless. The squad was shattered. Jennings dead, Ortiz barely conscious, Harper broken. Dalton looked at Riley, his face carved with exhaustion and grief. You saved him. After everything. Riley stared at Harper, who sat trembling, clutching his ruined legs. For once he didn't speak. She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. Because we don't leave our own. No matter what. Back at base, Harper was medevaced out. Rumor said he'd never walk again. Rumor said he was finished. But Riley knew better. A man like Harper didn't disappear quietly. He'd find a way to twist this to make her the villain, even from a hospital bed. Dalton tried to reassure her, but she saw it in his eyes too. The war wasn't done with them. Not the one outside the wire and not the one inside. That night, as the squad gathered around Carter's empty bunk, Ortiz broke the silence. You know what the crazy part is? Hayes is still here. And we're still breathing. Maybe that's all that matters. They laughed, weak but real, clinging to it like lifelines. Riley smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed on the door, on the shadows beyond. Because somewhere out there the enemy still waited. And inside these walls, another war was just beginning. The base smelled of smoke and antiseptic, a mix that clung to Riley's uniform as she walked the corridor toward the infirmary. Harper was gone, flown out days ago, broken legs, broken pride. The squad was smaller now, shadows of what they'd been. Carter buried, Jennings gone, Ortiz hobbling with more scars than swagger. Dalton carried the weight like armor, every decision sharp, deliberate. Riley could see the lines etched deeper into his face, lines that hadn't been there before the ambushes and traps. But command hadn't let her rest either. Rumors spread faster than bullets, the private with instincts like radar. Some called her blessed. Others whispered cursed. And now the higher-ups wanted to see for themselves. She didn't know it yet, but Harper wasn't finished with her. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks later, the squad was summoned to the briefing tent. The atmosphere inside was different, colder, heavier. Not just the regular officers. A colonel stood at the front, flanked by 2 men in plain clothes. Intelligence, no doubt. Dalton snapped the squad to attention. Riley felt eyes linger on her. The colonel cleared his throat. You've been selected for a high-risk operation. Intelligence points to a meeting of multiple insurgent leaders across the border. We intend to strike fast, deep, and without notice. Failure is not an option. Murmurs rippled. Dalton kept his jaw set. The colonel continued. This is a joint mission. SEALs will execute the primary strike. Your squad will provide diversion and containment. High chance of heavy resistance. Casualty risk is extreme. Riley's stomach tightened. Diversion meant bait. They were being sent into the fire. After the briefing, as the squad dispersed, one of the plainclothes men stopped Riley. His voice was low, too calm. Your reputation precedes you, Private Hayes. We'll be watching your performance closely. Riley stared at him. What reputation? He didn't answer. Just smiled faintly and walked away. Her skin crawled. The mission launched under moonless skies. Black hawks roared low, dropping them miles from the target. The air was cold, sharp, filled with static. Dalton rallied the squad, voice steady despite the weight pressing down on them. This is it. We hold the line by time for the SEALs. Stay tight. Watch each other's backs. Ortiz muttered, Great, so we're the decoys. Again. Riley almost smiled, but the humor died quick. Her gut churned. Something was wrong. Too wrong. As they set positions along the ridge overlooking the valley, she felt it, the heaviness, the warning stronger than ever. Her throat went dry. Dalton, she whispered. It's a setup. They know we're coming. He didn't question. You sure? Yes. Before he could act, gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the night, tracers slicing the dark. Insurgents swarmed from hidden trenches, dozens, maybe hundreds. It wasn't a diversion. It was an execution. The squad scrambled, returning fire, explosions rocking the ridge. Ortiz was knocked flat, his crutches gone. Mills screamed, clutching his arm. Dalton bellowed commands, pulling them into a tight circle. Riley fired until her rifle clicked empty, reloaded, fired again. But they were drowning in enemy fire. The radio crackled. SEAL command demanding updates. But their comms were jammed, static choking every word. Dalton's eyes locked on Riley. You feel it? What's the move? Her heart pounded. The ridge was death. Staying meant slaughter. She scanned fast, desperate, then saw it. A dry ravine cutting down the valley, narrow, dangerous, but it led away from the kill zone. There, she pointed. We fall back through the ravine. Now. Dalton didn't hesitate. Squad, move. They broke for it, bullets chasing their heels, explosions shaking the earth. Riley hauled Ortiz with one arm, firing with the other. Dalton covered the rear, relentless, unstoppable. They plunged into the ravine, sliding down, rocks cutting their skin. The walls shielded them from fire, but the enemy followed fast. Grenades boomed. Dust filled the air. Riley coughed, lungs burning, dragging Ortiz forward. At the end of the ravine, they hit another trap, barbed wire strung across, landmines glinting faintly in the dirt. Her chest clenched. It's blocked. Dalton cursed, firing back blindly. Options haze. She scanned, desperate. Her gut screamed. Up the wall, steep, jagged but climbable. There. Up the side. Dalton barked the order. They scrambled, clawing at rock, boots slipping. Riley pushed Ortiz, muscles screaming. Bullets whizzed past, sparks flying. They reached the top, breathless, bloodied. Ahead, faint headlights, the SEAL convoy. Reinforcements. Dalton waved, shouting hoarse. Friendly. Friendly. The SEALs opened fire over their heads, cutting down the pursuing insurgents with ruthless precision. The night lit up in a storm of tracers and explosions. Silence followed, broken only by ragged breaths. The squad collapsed, too drained to speak. Ortiz laughed weakly. Remind me to never follow your gut again, Hayes? Dalton dropped beside her, gripping her shoulder. You saved us. Again. But Riley wasn't listening. She was staring into the darkness, where more shadows moved. Not insurgents. Americans. Officers. Watching. Measuring. And among them, on a stretcher, flown in for observation, Harper. His eyes met hers across the chaos, cold, calculating. Her blood ran cold. Back at base, the debrief was chaos. Command praised the SEALs, downplayed the ambush, called the mission a qualified success. But the squad knew better. They'd been bait. Sacrificial pieces. Dalton argued, demanded answers, slammed his fists on tables. Ortiz cracked jokes in the infirmary, hiding pain with humor. The others retreated into silence. Riley? She couldn't shake Harper's stare. Why was he there? Why had command thrown them into slaughter? Late that night, she sat outside, desert wind cold on her face. Dalton joined her, quiet as always. They're testing you, he said finally. She frowned. Testing me? Your instincts. Your decisions. They're not accidents. They know it. And Harper's not done. He'll use this. Use you. Her throat tightened. I didn't ask for any of this. Dalton's gaze was steady. Doesn't matter. War doesn't care what you ask for. It makes you into what it needs. She stared at the stars, distant and cold. And what if what it needs breaks me? Dalton's hand rested on her shoulder, grounding. Then you break last. Weeks later, the squad stood on the airfield, gear packed, orders sealed. New assignment. Classified. The SEAL commander approached, saluted Riley. Not Dalton, not Harper, her. You've got something, he said quietly. Don't waste it. But don't trust everyone who notices. Then he walked away, leaving her with the salute burning in her chest. Dalton adjusted his pack, Ortiz muttered jokes, the others fell in line. Riley stood a moment longer, staring at the horizon. She was still just a private. No rank, no recognition. But she carried the weight of lives, the pull of instincts she didn't understand, and the gaze of enemies both outside and inside the wire. The war wasn't done with her. Not even close. And somewhere Harper was waiting. That night, as the plane roared into the sky, Riley closed her eyes. She wasn't sure where they were going. She wasn't sure who to trust. But she knew this. Every choice from now on would matter. Every instinct would shape survival. And when the time came, when Harper finally made his move, she'd be ready. Or she'd die trying. The war would decide. The end.